Welcome to the In Early podcast, where I speak to those at the forefront of the digital assets and technology sectors, telling real-life stories, considering the growth and growing pains of the industry, and exploring how blockchain and other technology has made an impact on people's lives. My name is Matt Green, and I head up blockchain, digital assets, and technology disputes at law firm Lawrence Stevens.
Rachel Wolcott is a journalist, previously of Thomson Reuters, reporting on financial crime and regulation. Now a founding editor of Compliance Corylated, Rachel continues to report on crypto matters, including market abuse, fraud, and money laundering. Rachel, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm really happy that you invited me today. This is such a pleasure.
Well, let's get straight into it, shall we?
Okay.
You're the founding editor of Compliance Corylated. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a founding editor. The other founding editor is Lindsay Rogerson, who was my colleague at Thomson Reuters. We worked together for years. And last year we had this amazing opportunity late in the year to create our own compliance, risk, fin crime, SME focused journalism and website. And it's been so much fun. We've been loving it. It's been a lot of kind of flying, how would I say it? Like a little, certain times feels a little bit of, seat of the pants type of thing. Like, oh, what are we doing today?
But that's good.
Yes.
That's exciting, no?
I've been doing journalism for a long time. So since the late 90s. So I always thought, when I get older, what am I going to do? They're going to farm you out. You're going to, I don't know what you'll wind up doing. So I never in my wildest dreams thought that in this stage of my life, I'd be handed this amazing opportunity to create my own thing with a woman who I respect so massively and bring our brand of news, our brand of investigating compliance and risk matters, regulatory matters to an audience and make a community for them.
So when we spoke initially when we were planning this podcast, I asked you what some of the big issues were in this space. And what I mean by this space is crypto, digital assets, blockchain, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And you identified two broad issues, which I think we're going to talk about today. Number one is the state of the industry's onboarding and KYC processes, which is to some extent leads to scams, laundering, facilitates criminal behaviors. And number two is fraud repayment rules and whether they are fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Now, I apologize. I'm going to do a little bit of reading because I've got some quotes to give, and then I'm going to ask you a question about it all.
Okay,
Right.
good.
So let's take the KYC and onboarding point first. So by way of example, this year alone, and bearing in mind we are recording in March 2025, we've had one KuCoin pleading guilty to unlicensed money transmission charges, which is reported on the US Attorney's Office website and reads as follows. Pecan Global Limited, a Seychelles-based entity that, since at least September 2019, has operated KuCoin, one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, pled guilty today to one count of operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. KuCoin flouted US anti-money laundering laws by failing to implement effective anti-money laundering and know your customer programs designed to prevent KuCoin from being used for money laundering and terrorist financing, failing to report suspicious transactions, and failing to register with the US Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network.
Yeah.
In connection with today's guilty plea, Pecan agreed to pay monetary penalties totaling more than $297 million. That's number one. Number two, we've also had OKX fined over $500 million in the US for anti-money laundering violations. The US Attorney Matthews Podolsky confirming for over 7 years, OKX knowingly violated anti-money laundering laws and avoided implementing required policies to prevent criminals from abusing our financial system. He continues. As a result, OKX has used to facilitate over $5 billion worth of suspicious transactions and criminal proceeds, end quote. This even involved, so the report goes, an OKX employee encouraging a US customer to bypass checks and issue an account based on false information.
Yeah, that all sounds really familiar.
Very familiar, right?
I mean, these aren't the only ones who have done this, but
these are ones that I just Googled literally beforehand.
Right? Exactly.
Number three, and I think I only do 3 illustrations here, so I won't.
That's okay.
Much. In the English High Court judgment of Deloitte last year, a case concerning the receipt of the proceeds of crime at BitCup, a Thai cryptocurrency exchange, the judge notes at paragraph 100 of that judgment that, and quoting, the claimant has established that BitCup's customer not only received laundered funds, but also had some active involvement in the fraud, whether as a perpetrator of it or as a money mule who lent the money out of her account to those behind the fraud, end quote. That is the longest question I've answered because there was a lot of talking there. However, the main question is, in your view, what on earth is going on here? Why is the mark being missed by so many crypto exchanges?
Well, it's not just cryptos. It's everybody. And I think partly it's because, like we were talking about, just before we started recording, that a lot of crypto entrepreneurs have a pretty libertarian view of the world. They're not particularly interested in systems and controls. They're not particularly interested in compliance. I mean, that's just some of them. I'm not saying everybody is like that. I'm saying some, as illustrated by these examples, don't take anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing work as seriously as they should. And we'll get on to this later, but part of it is, it's a lot of work to do that, right? And it's expensive. But
this is 2 things, right? Because what you've said is, to some extent, it's a libertarian, political philosophy style. And the other side, potentially, you're saying that it's actually to do with business. Is it a little bit of both?
Well, I think, libertarianism and business go hand in hand. They also are not so crazy about paying tax. So they want to make money and keep money. I mean, that's what libertarianism is. They believe in freedom. I'm actually reading a hilarious book at the moment called it's a libertarian walked into a bear. It's all about this community in New Hampshire that's taken over by a group of libertarians, Freetowners. Look, I highly recommend it. Maybe Matt can put a link in the show notes. Yeah, because what it shows is without rules, without some kind of common understanding of the way things work, without some tax funding for public services, the whole town falls to pieces. And they have this enormous bear problem of bears coming in, harassing residents, causing all kinds of chaos, eating livestock. It's mad. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to give people some information about libertarianism. And I think there is that libertarian spirit in the crypto world. And I think that you need to keep that in mind when you're thinking about crypto. It's about freedom. It's about decentralized finance. It's about, having the freedom to spend what you want when you want.
But does that philosophy mean that it's sort of we'll see how much you can get away with it, and then if you get fined, that's part of the business of being in this space? Yeah. That's not how it should operate.
No. Well, I think, and we'll talk about this a little more later, that on the one hand, crypto firms want to be regulated. But on the other hand, they're not so crazy about the rules. So I think there's always going to be this, coming to loggerheads. And the KYC angle is a case in point. And like I said before, it's not just the cryptos. It's a lot of financial services firms, big banks, fintechs, payment firms. There's a couple of things going on here. And one is that everybody has a different view of what KYC is. And some people think that doing KYC is like just getting your email address, your mobile phone number, and your home address. And that's KYC. At Lawrence Stevens, would that pass mustard?
No, we have to do proper checks on people, sanctions checks, all sorts, to make sure that we know who we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Is it that level of KYC that you would like to see, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, what the regulator will talk about is a risk-based approach. So if your granny is going to, I don't know, let's say your granny is a tech whiz and wants to open a crypto account, they're going to think, okay, Matt's granny, she's probably low risk. I mean, she's been in the same job or she's retired. She's lived in the same home. So what we'll do is we'll ask her for her name, address, some proof of identification. It used to be some kind of bill or maybe
utility bill.
Yeah, maybe it's your what's it called, national insurance number, something like that. So something that's a little more concrete. So that's the idea of a risk-based approach. You don't want to be doing the full enhanced due diligence on every single person, but you do need to be doing some basic checks. So some of the things that are prominent today in fintechs especially is that this kind of instant onboarding. And this is a problem. It's the same with cryptos. You want people to be able to open up an account and fund it and start doing business, trading or paying bills or whatever they need to do instantly. It's as if even waiting a couple of days is too long. And what crime subject matter experts say to me is like, listen, Rachel, like the technology for instant onboarding is not there yet. It's not good enough to manage risks. And they're worried about that we haven't found this balance between at speed onboarding and getting the controls right. So that's one thing that's a big deal. Then we've got everybody deciding when and how you can do KYC checks. So a for example is, let's say you open a MetaMask wallet. My experience is that you only need to have your email address, home address, and then you just fund it like using like Apple Pay or something.
Whatever funds that you can deposit with.
Exactly. So in theory, I've been KYC checked by whatever financial services firm I'm using in my Apple wallet. Is that really know your customer?
When I log onto my Coinbase account, they're always, every year they ask me financial information updates. They want to see my face. They want to see my ID.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me seems like quite a lot. Seems a little bit overkill potentially. But I wonder whether everyone else is behaving like that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know either. And I mean, to me, if they're capturing that kind of data, that sounds more reasonable. So there's always going to be a sliding scale. Some firms are going to be doing a better job than others. But, just in terms of this interpretation of the rules point, some firms seem to think that if you are onboarding a customer who's only, funding an account with, let's say under £10,000, under 10,000 euros, or even lower, that you don't need to do any checking. And that is just wrong. So what I see is some like creative interpretations of the rules. And, someone like Coinbase wants to be regulated. Coinbase do want to get these licenses because some of them see this as a way of getting it, solidifying their business and making it more like long lasting. Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you look at the Financial Conduct Authority's website, first published all the way back in 2019, it says, quote, crypto asset businesses need to be registered with the FCA under the Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing and Transfer Funds Information on the Payer Regulations 2017.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. Yeah.
Or the MLRs.
Yeah.
And comply with the requirements, the regulations, if they intend to provide certain crypto asset services by way of business, and if the service will be in the course of business carried on by them in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. It notes further that, quote, businesses must take appropriate steps to identify and assess the risks of money laundering, proliferation financing, and terrorist financing, which the business is subject to, and assess the money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing risks related to any new technologies prior to launch, and take appropriate measures to manage and mitigate those risks. End quote. Your article I saw from January 22 this year notes the FCA have relied on powers under the MLRs 45 times since 2020. What's going on there? Do you get a sense that the providers are complying and they're not? What's your general feel of all this?
The UK has, or the Financial Conduct Authority has been quite stringent at the gateway, so at the authorizations gateway, even though this isn't really an authorization, this is a registration. So they are only sort of supervised in terms of the money laundering regulations. So this is like a very entry level type of obligations. And I only say that just because, to be regulated as an entire business, there's just so much more to it. I'm not saying that anti-money laundering compliance is easy. Far from it. And I think that is why the FCA has been using its powers. First of all, they have a consumer protection mandate. They are really worried about people getting fleeced with crypto deals. I mean, there are so many out there. People lose money, and it's not just that it's fraud or a scam. It's because some of the assets, even like Bitcoin, if you bought Bitcoin at the beginning of the year, you're like, what, $15,000, $20,000 down. The FCA always says, this is very risky. Be careful. So they're being tough at the gateway to make sure that people don't get through. So who shouldn't be registered. So one of them is an example was this guy who just got sent to jail this week. The man who was running the crypto ATM network. He tried to get FCA authorized. He failed. He appealed to the upper tribunal, failed again. He had sort of an inglorious track record of going to banks and saying that he was a catering company, so basically lying about what his business was. Yeah. He did the same thing with some crypto exchanges, according to the FCA. So this was a guy who in 2020 thought he had a chance of being FCA registered with his crypto network. Now he's in jail. So you could maybe see where the FCA has some concerns.
Is this 45? There's number 45 that you reported on. Mm-hmm. Is that high?
Well, let's say right now there are probably 50 registered crypto firms in the UK. And if all but 5 have had these powers imposed on them, that is high. So there's something like 368 crypto firms have attempted to become registered for MLRs. 50 have succeeded so far. So you can see the rejection rate, or they don't reject. They just say, go away. We're not doing this. Come back later, is pretty high. And what the FCA wants to do is, because so many of these firms are going to be startups or very young companies, they don't have AML CFT experience.
Or track records of showing the regulator what they've done in the past. And I assume the regulator's saying, show me what you've done in the last 3-5 years. And they go, well, nothing.
Absolutely. So the regulator will be using these regulations 74C of the MLRs to basically impose conditions on the firm to make sure that they are doing what they say that they're going to do. Maybe put some restrictions on, onboarding certain kinds of customers and things like that. I don't think it's a secret the FCA is pretty risk averse about crypto, and I think this is just part of that.
Well, moving on to Europe, your publication on the 21st of January notes that actually there are very few major brands which have obtained licenses under MiCA, the EU stablecoin regulation, to become crypto asset service providers in the EU markets. Do you think that there is a KYC angle here as to why there are so few large brands?
And yes. But I also think that it's this bigger compliance culture point that I was making before. To be MiCA compliant, you need to be spending a ton of money on having all different kinds of risk management, systems and control frameworks. So you're going to have that AML CFT piece, so the fin crime piece, but you're also going to have your senior managers vetted.
So you're going to have sensible people. You're going to have to spend some money.
A lot of money.
Make sure that you are compliant, whether that's hiring the right people internally, hiring people externally to provide a service, or both.
Mm-hmm.
That's the tension.
Yeah, and also part of MICA is that you have to do ESG reportings when you're doing like a coin offering.
But surely, if you're a big brand, you would assume, hopefully, that they're the guys who have got the deepest pockets and they're therefore able to get on board with what MICA requires. So again, do you feel as though there is something else going on?
It's weird that they're not all breaking down the doors of the EU regulators to become MICA licensed. Maybe the licensing process is taking longer than they expected, or it's been reported, for example, that Binance is under investigation in France for financial crime violations. So there could be some existing baggage here.
To use a technical term.
Yes,
I wonder whether
the bagage.
some of the larger brands are large brands because they were able to flout certain KYC issues years ago and therefore have been able to capitalize and become big brands. And now that the regulator is coming forward and putting limitations on those brands, they aren't able to get over that hurt. So it may well be we see a new wave of brands that weren't necessarily incorporated 5-6 years ago, but within that time frame from now, and who are able to comply. I just wonder where sort of a middle ground.
We're seeing some instances of firms that have experience with compliance
Already, and they got that infrastructure to allow.
Absolutely. But I think the Europeans have been really clear that these are the rules. This is what you've got to do. And in fact, I think it was last week or the week before that ESMA put out some guidance about reverse solicitation, which is basically if you're not MICA licensed, these are the rules about tapping up EU customers. And I think those will be very limiting for crypto firms.
Almost like a positive obligation not to be involved in that jurisdiction, which might include like geo-blocking websites.
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely that. But I mean, what we haven't talked about, Matt, is, what's going on in the US. So cryptos, US is the biggest crypto market. It's going to be the biggest crypto market. It could be that maybe some of these big brands are like,
not so worried about being in the EU so much because our focus is in the US. That's a philosophical home, maybe.
Yeah, well, you put your finger on it. I think it is the philosophical home because we are seeing this deregulatory
policy, right?
Yeah.
It's a broad, sweeping policy.
Yeah, we're seeing alignment with some libertarian type ideas. I'm not going to name any names. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. I mean, if you look at what's being changed in the U.S., it's making the regulatory agencies less powerful, less big, less able to undergo enforcement. And obviously, I mean, you'll have seen the SEC has dropped a slew of cases against.
I'll pay all that.
Yeah, loads. So they're basically saying, come on over. The water's great. We're thinking about doing this crypto reserve thing. I mean, that sounds a bit cuckoo.
Let's see.
Yeah. Well, they're really ratcheting up the risk taking over in the U.S.
Well, I wonder whether that's it. I wonder whether there has been a turn. Not so worried about the UK anymore. Not so worried about Europe. Let's focus on the US because we're being welcomed with open arms in that.
And people dig that stuff over there.
Of course they do. They love it. Anyway, you recently published an article on Reuters about a KYC provider.
Oh, yeah.
Which helps onboard clients to crypto companies as well as other financial institutions, saying that they had links to the Russian government.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want to be a little bit careful about what you say because you've got some bother. But
yeah.
I wonder whether you can give us a very brief headline of what that was all about and then some of the repercussions.
Well,
without getting yourself into trouble. Or me, in fact.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to do a podcast with a lawyer who I know for a fact has some experience in defamation claims and whatnot. Yeah. So that's just really good because one thing you do get worried about is even if you've written something You haven't been sued. You go, let's say, do a TED Talk, and you mouth off about stuff, and the next thing you know, you owe Aaron Banks like $1 million.
Well, yeah, let's try and let's give a headline as to what our article was about, and then maybe what happened afterwards.
Yeah. So the headline of the article was that this emerging KYC identity verification company was funded by what was founded in Russia, in St. Petersburg. It's absolutely true. And had some funding from a Kremlin fund around 2013 that was aimed, it was like the Kremlin Internet Fund. It was aimed at investing in a wide range of
a diversified portfolio.
Yeah, of technology firms. So there were some education stuff things in here. And then there was a early version of this company that was all about basically trying to find fakes, check documents to see if they were real, or check pictures,
authenticity.
To see if they'd been doctored. And this grew into a KYC company that was still operating in Petersburg, and up until I think right after the Ukraine war broke out. But they had opened a UK limited company, I think it was 2015. And the thing was, they had also had funding from some venture capitalists that were Russian.
I'm just going to pause you there, because why is that a problem?
Well,
why is any of that a problem? Russian companies are allowed to operate. Given I know that, let's just sort of think about this in isolation. Why is all of this a problem? I know that there are sanctions and stuff going on with the war, etc. But to what end is that newsworthy?
It's important for financial services firms to know who they're dealing with. Transparency. I mean, that was the main thing for me. The senior executives at this company had de-Russified their names.
What, on Companies House?
On their website, and a little bit on Companies House, although they've since changed their Companies House filings. There was a lot of, at least to me, questions about their ownership structure, and whether certain high-ranking, maybe not high-ranking, influential Russians and Russian investors were still holding ownership of this company through offshore structures. And I also thought it was weird that the company had this complicated ownership structure. To me, that was a little weird. They claimed they were 100% UK based, but it wasn't really until the last couple of years that they had any meaningful footprint here in terms of...
Company ownership can change. I mean, I'm not sort of defending because I don't know too much about it. Yeah. They're just... it's important to, when you're telling a story like this, I think, to be able to point out what some of the issues may be. I mean, it may be that they've changed ownership, but your view was that actually
they've had
a change of ownership. It was an issue relating to transparency.
Like you said, it's about transparency. You should be open about your own company, maybe. Separate from this company, there is a lot of scholarship out there about how the Kremlin, this sounds borderline conspiracy, but it is an absolute fact. It's something that is being played out today, has been infiltrating the West through lots of different means, seeking to influence people here, seeking to move money around, seeking to move money from Russia to the West to fund espionage programs, all kinds of different things. I mean, we saw this in the Mueller report that came out through the investigation into the 2016 election in the United States about how money from Russia was brought over to influence the election outcome. It was something that's been going on for years. It's something that is really set out very clearly in Catherine Belton's book, Putin's People. There's a new report out from the Atlantic Council talking about how powerful people in Russia with a lot of money have a lot of influence and are pushing the Putin agenda. Now, I'm not by any means saying that this was the case with this KYC company, but they did have quite a big investor who was considered to be an oligarch, Ilya Sherbovich. They denied it, but it was on their website in a archived version of their website. So this is why it's important to have a look. Maybe there's no there, but the geopolitical situation today, we're recording in March, like you said, it's just been announced the U.S. will no longer be supporting Ukraine. These issues are important. You need to know who you're dealing with.
And you're saying that these issues infiltrate a variety of different industries. So it's vitally important that you know where the money's coming from, who the money's going to assist with transparency.
Yeah.
I know you were talking about being conspiratorial, so I'm going to move on to the next question because it does sort of lead into that.
Oh, you were talking about it.
It's your words. But anyway, to those skeptics among us, there's an issue here, certainly to do with KYC and goodwill and the brands.
Uh-huh.
The good brands on the right side of the sector are associating themselves with those who are accused of wrongdoing. So, for example, TRM Labs, hugely respected outfit providing blockchain analytics.
Yeah.
Joined forces with Tron and Tether to establish, and I quote, a T3 financial crime unit.
Whatever that is.
The T3 FCU. A first-of-its-kind initiative aimed at facilitating public-private collaboration to combat illicit activity associated with the use of USDT and the Tron blockchain. Mm-hmm. End quote. Fine. Pardon me. The TRM's press report and I'm going to do this chronologically because it is relevant. The TRM press report from September 2024 says stablecoins like USDT serve as the backbone of the digital asset industry, providing a stable core of value and enabling seamless movement of funds between platforms. By collaborating to proactively identify and disrupt illicit activity, the T3 FCU aims to promote security and prosperity across the Tron network and beyond. End quote. Then they talk about Tether, and they say, to quote, at Tether, safeguarding the integrity of the blockchain ecosystem is a top priority and a responsibility we embrace with a key player in the digital asset space. This commitment drives us to take proactive measures in helping maintain the security and trustworthiness of the ecosystem. Notes their CEO, end quote, right? By October...
Was that an eye roll, Matt?
It was by October, by October, it's being reported that prosecutors in the USA are investigating Tether for money laundering and sanctions violations through global criminal networks, conducting terrorism, hacking, and drug trafficking. Mm-hmm. By December 2024, a Financial Times article was entitled "The Criminals' Go-To Cryptocurrency," making reference to Tether.
Yeah, that's been a very common observation.
Yeah. Strangely, however, a Bloomberg article from back in March 2024, therefore before the partnership, there's a headline which reads, Tether is the most used stablecoin in illicit crypto flows, TRM says. End quote. My question to you then, do you feel like there's some brand washing here? Are there more conspiratorial reasons why this is happening? Do you sense there's actually some good with some bad and everybody's trying to find a way to pass through this negativity? What on earth is going on here?
So are we going to do like the Mulder and Scully thing?
We're going to come, I think yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this? Because to me, it's curious. TRM's hugely respected, partnering with Tether, whether you like them or not. Some people think they're great, some people don't necessarily think they're so great, are linked to bad behavior. Yeah. And Tether has commented on their bad behavior, and yet they want to work with them. Now, there is something admirable in saying, look, I can see that there's a problem over here, and I want to fix it. I, TRM, want to help Tether become a better entity, project, whatever. But it does seem curious that this partnership, in the way that I've read the quotes, exists. It seems a little counterintuitive. I can see the good and the bad, but I wondered whether you had any thoughts on things like that.
Right. Well, I think broadly, crypto companies, obviously this is a stable coin, so it's a little different. Will always tell you that they're cooperating with law enforcement.
Yes.
And that they're trying really hard to go after the bad guys and root out bad behavior and criminality on their exchanges or on their blockchains or whatever. And I have no idea what this is about, but I think...
Had you heard of this?
Yeah, I had. So, like you said, a lot of people are hugely skeptical about this. I see comments about this on LinkedIn all the time. Like, it's become a little bit of an albatross for TRM in terms of what gets posted every time they try to make a point on LinkedIn. People believe that they downplay the amount of crime that happens enabled by crypto.
Yeah.
And so there's questions about, are you just looking at on-chain, or are you looking everywhere?
Or are there interests elsewhere? I'm not saying there are, but I can see someone from the outside looking and going, well, if you're saying that, I don't know, crime is this number, but I know actually, because I'm a police officer, that it's higher. What's the reasoning why it's being put so low? I personally think that their crime reports are actually very informative. I think they're really good. But stuff like this partnership, it does feel like there's slightly more at play, and it would be great to be able to hear someone from TRM or any of these companies give a view as to what necessarily is going on here. But it does seem like an ongoing potential headache for them.
Well, it does open them up to widespread criticism online. That is for sure. But, the mood music in the United States is changing. Now, Howard Lutnick, his company, I think, is the custodian for Tether. So we've got somebody with connections to Tether in the inner circle of the new administration in the United States. I think that could be having something to do. I'm not saying that is why, but, it's just an example of how...
last year, wasn't it? So it may well be
this is
certain timing.
Yeah, like the mood music has changed. Maybe all of Tron, a Tether on Tron, is going to be seen as perfectly fine. Although it's difficult to say, because we had this other humongous incident last year, which was Pavel Durov, the Telegram chief executive, being arrested in France.
That's right.
And what's the link between Pavel Durov and Tron on Tether? Well,
back-end data, wasn't it? It was access.
Well, yeah. Telegram announced that they were going to be, enabling payments on the Tether on Tron blockchain. And at the same time, the French authorities are basically saying this was alleged that Telegram wasn't doing enough to cooperate with law enforcement.
So Tron one.
No, Telegram.
Yeah, Telegram. Sorry,
yeah,
Tether.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my mistake. There are too many T's. Trons, Tellers, Telegram, whatever. So I think there's lots of different kind of pieces here, and I think that it's really easy to try to find like one explanation for something that is big, has a lot of moving parts, different kinds of relationships. People are able to do all kinds of shady things through that network, but at the same time, they're able to do that on Facebook as well.
Well, precisely. Social media.
WhatsApp, etc. And it brings out all these questions about, are these networks actually really end-to-end encrypted, all this, that, and the other thing.
Well, that was the thing with Telegram. It was that how is it different from WhatsApp, and how is it different from Signal, and who holds the data?
Yeah. Well, the thing about Telegram that people say is that, the reason why they're allowed to operate in Russia now is because the Kremlin has a little back door that can look in, which BTW is what the UK government would like Apple, to do as well. So, like I say, it's like this, it's sort of like this cauldron of mess, of of crypto and messaging technology, marketplaces for lots of terrible things, everything from, you and I have heard about this, like selling body parts, people trafficking, drugs smuggling, money laundering. There's been reporting about KYC information for sale in private Facebook book groups.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it comes anywhere near answering your question about TRM and Tether, but you would think a company like TRM would be coming at this with good intention.
I would love to think that.
No, absolutely, because they wouldn't be the first technology solutions company to partner with a firm that might be controversial or might not be really interested in like too much oversight. I mean, this you could make a parallel between firms, broker dealers who buy a trade surveillance system to kind of comply with market abuse regulations, and then they just don't plug it in, or they don't, calibrate it correctly, so it winds up not catching anything.
So on KYC, I suppose is the last question about this is, you've written about the no KYC accounts provided by Mercurio and banks, double aims.
Search me.
Offering MasterCard debit cards. What's the story here in a nutshell?
Basically, in the nutshell, you have a debit card issued by MasterCard linked to a non-custodial crypto wallet. So non-custodial wallets have become really popular because of this whole fiasco, number of fiascos in around 2023, 2022, sorry, FTX exploding or imploding. Then there were a couple other ones. I think it was Celsius, where I think they'd had this staking product. And when these companies went bust, we had this whole, as you know, not your keys, not your crypto. And people were like, not super happy about that. So non-custodial wallets became popular because you have your crypto in your own wallet. It can be on one of these like little phone devices. So that way, if your crypto exchange blows up, you've got all your crypto on your little thing. I don't like.
Surely that's a custodial wallet.
No, that's non-custodial because they don't have anything to do it. If you're self-custodying,
yes,
you're the custodian, not the crypto exchange.
Yeah. So you're self-custodying and they're offering a debit card on the
off your self-custody wallet that you don't need to have any KYC on.
Right.
And then the other part to this is that on Mercurio's website, advertising is, we don't know how you spend it. You can go spend anything. So you establish your non-custodial wallet, look at what MetaMask says about their non-custodial wallet. Like, they don't look, it's all anonymous. They don't have any idea who you are or what's coming into your wallet.
And that's going to be my follow-up question. Like, what's the problem with this? It's because they don't know who you are. You could be using it for any illicit means.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Well, surely MasterCard have a role to play in this.
Well, MasterCard says they're complying with all of the regulations.
Just left it like that.
Yeah, pretty much. MetaMask is like, it's compliant, but if it is compliant, then it's not, then you are doing KYC on it. Therefore, it is not really a non-custodial wallet. You know who these people are. You are doing some kind of checks on who's coming in and out. So it's like two things can't be true at the same time.
Yeah.
It can't be compliant and really be a non-custodial wallet, which, by the way, the new anti-money laundering rules that are coming in the EU in 2027 will outlaw. They will not allow you to have a non-custodial wallet, and any crypto transactions, I think over 10,000 euros, will need to be reported, or you'll have to gather more information. It's just like if you go into your bank with 10 grand in cash and try to put it into your bank account, they're supposed to, ask some questions.
Yes. Let's turn to the second part of this, which was authorized payment fraud.
Yeah.
Can you define what that is?
Yeah. So APP fraud is authorized push payment fraud. So this is a fraudster calling up you saying, hey, Matt, I've got this great investment opportunity for you. All you need to do is transfer 10 grand to me, or transfer, buy this amount of crypto and then put it on in my non-custodial.
So I suppose it is socially engineered fraud.
Yeah.
That when you look at it, it was conducted by the victim. So it looks legitimate on the face.
Absolutely.
But that ultimately was done under some sort of social duress. ACAM's Global AFC Threats Report 2025 notes as a top threat authorized fraud they're calling, quote, organized crime harnessing the power of technology. And note, tools like social media, messaging apps, generative AI, and crypto assets enable criminals to scale their operations and profits, while governments, law enforcement, and industry are struggling to keep up, end quote. And in that respect, what trends are you seeing, and why might these rules be unfit for purpose?
I think it's the law enforcement and governments have only just started to kind of scratch the surface of this problem, even though ACAMS in particular has been beating the drum about pig butchering for at least 3 years now. It's only really beginning to creep into more mainstream media reporting. It's only starting to get discussed at the government level. So I think policymakers are just way behind on this. So I think the problem is that we don't have a concerted response. And it used to be that a lot of these scams were being conducted, the pig butchering scams were being conducted out of the Mekong kind of triangle region in Southeast Asia. But that is also changing. Also, there's a lot of unhelpful finger pointing at the Chinese, like as if they're enabling it. Chinese people get scammed by pig butchering scammers all the time. It's not like it's only happening to certain people in certain countries. Pig butchering has become a global phenomenon. This has been known for a couple of years now, that what started or may have started in Southeast Asia has gone global. There are scam compounds in, I think, South America. There are scam compounds in UAE. I think also in Africa, I've seen reports. They're all over the place. Eastern Europe is another one. It's a little different. I think they're more like boiler room scams, maybe not so much as like the compounds where you see people who have been in fact trafficked or lured to these compounds under false pretenses, to then they're stuck there to perpetrate scams. And they're using all this technology, like you said,
yes,
to reach more people, take on different identities, and con people, like we were talking about before, to make payments in crypto most of the time to the scammers' wallets.
Yeah, I mean, there was a case that I was working on where a lady's funds were traced to an exchange's customer. Having received the disclosure, the customer was what was the best way to describe this? I think I've mentioned this before on this podcast, a human organ harvesting facility in Myanmar. And you could see the Google reviews. The investigator at the time was showing me where the compound was on Google Maps, and the Google reviews. I've had a kidney removed, etc. It was bizarre.
Oh my God.
But in that case, funds were recovered because the exchange were very helpful. But that's the world in which when KYC and when push payment fraud occurs, that's where we end up in organ harvesting facilities and human trafficking, drugs, and horrible crime. To end this, I think it's well and good us criticizing the state of the market, and I think people are generally trying to do a good job, and I think the shackles of bad behavior are slowly coming off, although you may disagree. What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see implemented in a nutshell?
I think what we have here, like I was saying before, is the kind of libertarian attitudes of crypto bumping up against regulation. And I think that unless we, like you were suggesting, maybe we'll get a new breed of crypto entrepreneurs, that is going to be really difficult for people who have are passionate about this libertarian philosophy, about freedom, about not being surveilled by the state. I mean, that's one of the things in Project 2025, particular to crypto, which is the sort of unofficial Republican manifesto in the U.S. If you haven't heard of Project 2025, just Google it. It'll come right up. And if you do a search under crypto, it'll say, and this was in the Republican platform, no surveillance of crypto transactions. So if we know that the crypto industry in the United States spent a lot of money on the last election, they had I'm not sure if it was a PAC or just a kind of an interest group called Fair Shake. And I want to say that maybe they spent in the region of 40 to 90 million. Don't quote me on that. It's something around there. Again, Google Fair Shake crypto, it'll come up. So to me, that's signaling not that they have any bad intentions or want to enable crime or anything like that, but they definitely want to have be at the table when any U.S. crypto rules are being written, or maybe make it a pretty low touch regime. So maybe we'll see in Europe the more regulatory friendly cryptos emerging, people who are willing to do the work, because in Europe, they definitely, and it's not just Europe, IOSCO, the International Organization of Securities Regulators, basically. IOSCO, again, Google it. Definitely see, TradFi rules being applied to crypto. And, yes, the technology is different, but from a regulator's point of view, what is the same is market abuse protections. What is the same is, whether senior managers are fit and proper. Are you doing enough on ESG? Are you compliant with the Digital Operational Resilience Act in the EU? Are you putting systems and controls in place to make sure that what you are selling to customers is appropriate?
If you were to summarize then what you wanted to see implemented, it's a balance between the libertarian philosophy and equalizing, as it were, or neutralizing that tension that comes with regulation, so that there's sort of a happy medium between the two, respecting sort of both sides.
I think that maybe the cryptos need to do a little more to meet regulators in the middle. But at the same time, the regulators in the EU and the UK, as you know well, are having this big deregulation conversation at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think on top of all that, especially in the UK, we're going to have this consumer focus, in the consumer duty. I can tell you 100% without a doubt, the Financial Conduct Authority here does not want to see customers being ripped off, because as we can see with the current saga with the car finance issue, that
no one wants any more of that.
Yeah, you don't want that, because what's going to happen is they're going to look and they're going to be like, listen, you were ripping off your customers for 5 years. Then you have a fight because people don't want to pay their customers back. The customers go to the FAS. The FAS gets overwhelmed. I mean, this is what happened with the car thing. Then the FCA has to step in. I mean, I think we need to see some good faith, and I think that crypto firms need to make sure that they're not putting meme coins and the things where people who are their customers will be exposed to fraud risk on their platforms.
This podcast is dedicated to Sam Tyfield, who we lost last year. He was a partner at Shoesmith, who I worked with. Thoroughly nice guy, very, very knowledgeable, great sense of humor, and is the reason how Rachel and I know each other.
Yeah. I miss Sam a lot. He had a great sense of humor. He was a unique thinker. He brought different points of view to a problem, and he got me to think about regulation, especially in the kind of broker-dealer, algo trading, high-frequency trading space, a little differently. And he was a real advocate for that clientele.